You are listening to X Wing Radio.
Welcome back, all you New Republic scum. I'm David, that's Wesley, and you just tuned in to X-Wing Radio, your weekly broadcast from a galaxy far, far away.
David, I would have to believe that it wasn't coincidence that you said New Republic scum, because we are talking today about The Last Command, which is a book
Mhm.
that takes place during the time of the New Republic. And I would presume that you are siding with Thrawn, because, well, you would. So I would assume that you agree that the Empire is should really be in charge, and that the New Republic is just a band of rebels, and are some scum.
I mean, in all reality, the Empire is the only thing that can defend the galaxy against the Yuuzhan Vong, so, you know, which,
Well,
that, that's kind of a spoiler for uh, some of the other Timothy Zahn stuff, because that's not actually gotten into in these books. But yes, we read the Last Command, the third and final book in the uh, Timothy Zahn's Thrawn Trilogy.
a lot of interesting developments in this. Um, as you just said, this is the final book in the trilogy, which means this has to wrap everything up. David, I
Mhm.
was listening to the ending of this book, um, and I had like maybe an hour, 45 minutes left in it to listen to. Um, and I was like, I don't know how this is going to conclude. Because when you get to the end of the book, and obviously we need to go through the events of the book before we get all the way to the end of it. But when you get to the end of it, they're focusing on the main characters of the Republic, like Han, Luke, Leia, all them. But Thrawn and Pelion are off doing something else. They haven't referenced them in a long time. And you're sitting here like, wait a minute. When are all these characters going to get together? When are all these characters going to meet for the last time? Yada, yada, yada. What's going to happen? And, you get right down there to the end of the book and you're like, I don't see how this is going to happen. I only have so much left of it. Wait a minute, what? Now, obviously, we could talk more about how it ends in a little bit, but it was a very interesting ending. In some ways, I felt like a little bit of an abrupt ending for
Mhm.
for part of it. But all in all, I mean, it was still a good book. It's still, Timothy Zahn did a great job in this trilogy. Each one of the books is a great read and tells a great story. But anyways, little bit of an abrupt ending that we'll get to in a
Mhm.
while here. But
Now,
a lot of interesting points made in this movie, particularly the focus on the clones, which is something that gets addressed a lot in this book, because that is how Thrawn is staffing and running his Katana fleet ships. He's cloning, and there's some interesting things within cloning that they talk about in this book. Obviously, this took place before George Lucas came up with what he wanted clones to look like in Star Wars and how he wanted them to function. So there's a lot of things that you can tell this is not something from the modern era of Star Wars.
yeah, it's actually kind of funny because someone had I saw a clip from an interview with Timothy Zahn, and someone had asked him about the clones. He was like, "It never occurred to me that the clones were the good guys."
Yeah, that's
I
funny.
mean, I mean, okay. inevitably, yes, they were, Order 66. At least in the way the movies portrayed the clones, they weren't really, they were fighting for the Republic, but, you know, they weren't really good guys because they betrayed the Jedi.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, we've gotten Clone Wars since then, and obviously from that interpretation of the clones, they are, good guys. But it is an interesting thing too. One thing I do want to point out too is there is actually duology, a duology, um, that Timothy Zahn wrote later that takes place after the Thrawn trilogy. Um, and it has to do with some of the stuff. I don't know if Thrawn is in it. It's related to Thrawn. So that might be an interesting thing to look into after this. Um, why I say I don't. Well, we'll get into that. Why I say I don't know if Thrawn is actually in it. But um, yeah, it's interesting because it does kind of, like you said, wrap up. It does kind of abruptly end, and there's a lot of little loose ends that do get tied back together, but maybe not necessarily the most neatly. Um, so it's been 3 weeks since I have read this book. I probably should have read it again in preparation for the podcast. But so Leslie, why don't you go ahead and start us off with the beginning, because that's the part that I don't really remember
David,
the best.
no, no. See, this is the thing. I told you the other day that I had finished it. When I started this book, it was about 3 weeks ago. So we're about on the same timetable here. I just take a little longer to read them. No, don't be asking
Well,
me what
okay.
the beginning of the
The
book
first
is
time, the
about.
first time I listened to it took me 2 days. I listened to the whole thing in 2 days. So,
I do remember, and as I'm sitting here reading this plot summary, I do remember feeling a little disoriented coming into the book because at the end of the last one, they had just had the Katana Fleet battle.
mm.
And there's not necessarily a time jump, but they do skip a little bit.
So
Um,
it's not as do you remember that it's not as neat of a because okay, so uh Dark Force Rising picks up right after, but like literally right after Heirs of the Empire.
mhm.
This there is like a few weeks between, maybe even up to a few months between.
Well, there is some time because not
Hmm.
too far into the book, we do get to see Mara Jade, and they say she has been in a coma or sleep for a month.
Yeah.
So we do see that. Her and um, what's the hacker slicer's name? Um,
Um, you had to
kid.
ask. I can't. Uh, um,
He plays a pretty significant role. Um,
Aves? Is it Aves?
no, Aves is one of his like lieutenant, like first in command,
Yeah.
second in
Okay.
command, whatever, like under Mara.
It's the
Um,
other guy from Thrawn's not Thrawn's Bard's organization.
Bards.
Um,
Who's Bard?
Bard.
Card. Okay, I was gonna say who's Bard? Him and
Gint.
Mara.
Gint.
Him and Gint. Yes, Gint and Mara are on course because she needed medical help that no one besides really the New Republic could give her. Um, Luke is kind of on his own path again, trying to find the cloning facility. Um, how is it that we waited so long and we still uh didn't come prepared?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um,
Where do I think? Where did my thing go? Thought so. I thought somewhere. Yeah, he meets up. Luke meets up with Talon Card on what's this planet called? Bird Chest. He meets Card there, and that's when they start to talk about, um, maybe Card helping out the New Republic with information. Obviously, they pay for it. Yada yada yada. And this is, I think, why I was like, "There's what's the timetable here?" Because I don't know if this was necessarily how the book opens up, but it's not too far into it, and this is the first time we see Card, and you're sitting there like, wait a minute, last I saw these characters, they were all at the Katana Fleet, and now they're
mm,
all dispersed, haven't seen each other in a while, something's up, some sort of time has passed. But this kind of sets Card off, not necessarily this specific event, but this kind of pushes Card towards doing that, gathering information for the New Republic, and even getting other smugglers to gather information for the New Republic. We have a couple different
mm,
story threads that we follow throughout this. Honestly, they condensed down the Luke going off by himself and Han and Lando and Leia. They kind of condensed all that down into one story for the most part, with Mara kind of joining in on that one. And they have Card, and then they have the villain side of things with Hellion and Thrawn. They still have
mm.
those three storylines, but they kind of condense the characters down a little bit and have
Now,
Card have his own side of things.
so one thing that I don't think we mentioned, or we kind of glossed over. I think we did mention it, but we kind of glossed over it when we talked about Dark Force Rising. Was the fact that Lando for the whole book was trying to get back to Mclon, his uh mining facility,
Yeah,
and so he find in this time gap, this like roughly about a month, he finally actually was able to go back just in time for the Empire to raid his raid Mclon for all the precious metals and stuff that
yeah.
he had stockpiled.
So this is why he gets dragged back into. I thought I'd be better by now. Anyways, this he also gets dragged back into all this because he goes to the New Republic to try and see if he can get help to rebuild and get everything taken care of. He only has so much time because if you remember from the last couple books when I talked about it, something with the sun, and they have to, everything basically he only has so much time before everything gets destroyed because of the rotation of the planet and how it
Yeah,
affects
so
everything.
the mining operation is it's from Nomad City is what it's called. Um, it's basically a star destroyer on top of a bunch of decommissioned AT-ATs. So it's a moving city, and it stays on
Hmm.
the dark side of this planet because it's so close to its star that the daylight side of the planet, it's too hot to do anything, and it would destroy anything on the daylight side of the planet. So that's so when the Empire raided Nomad City, they disabled it, so it wasn't able to move. So they only had a certain amount of time before it could um before it was destroyed. And so that's why he goes to the New Republic to try to get help to um basically save this whole operation. Which is honestly kind of a like very minor plot point. It's basically just to get Lando back into the main story.
That's
Um,
so at this point in time, the New Republic is very stretched thin, trying to defend against. This is the whole reason of the last book when they were trying to get a katana fleet, so they'd have extra ships.
mm,
And and even of the first book where Han was going around trying to ask smugglers if they would help with ships that they had. So ships have been a whole thing throughout this whole entire saga here or trilogy here, and it's just coming in again here. They tell Lando they can't help him because they can't risk sending ships over there for that, even though Lando's operation would be beneficial to him, getting them metals. It's just not something that they can afford right now. Now, uh, I want to make a comment about this. Sitting here reading through the summary, so a lot of stuff happens on Coruscant in this because a lot of the characters there throughout this book. One of the things that they are really focusing on and trying to take out is this thing called Delta Source, which is a leak
mm,
in the New Republic that sends out information to Thrawn. Now, there were a bunch of hints early on in the book and reasons as to why I thought this. It did not end up being this, and I was a little interested with the way that they went about doing Delta Source, which we'll get to in a second. My first thought, and I wasn't sure what the motive behind it would be, but my first thought was it's winter.
mm,
I was like, it's gonna end up being winter. She's gonna end up being Delta Source. And I'm like, I don't know what her reasoning would be for it. Because she does seem real sweet, nice, innocent, and just, like a really good aide for Leia. So I was like, but I'm calling it now. It's gonna be winter. It did not end up being winter. But
mm.
that
That thought, yeah, that thought occurred to me as well. Especially when they went through the whole thing of it being when they were looking for Delta Source
mm-hmm. Yep.
and it kind of like started reporting things that weren't necessarily like important at all, just to throw off the trail
Yeah.
or seemingly, um, which we'll get to that. But that's kind of when I was like, okay, this might end up being Winter. Just because it's an original character to the book, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
So it was a little bit of a not sure what would be happening at this point in
yeah.
time with her, but
Now,
it ended up being her.
one important thing that this happened. I think this is actually in the first chapter. Um, I don't remember the name of the planet, but Thrawn of the Empire takes up is taking planets now. And they take one of the New Republic's, basically a planet that provides food to most of the New Republic. Like it's a very important agricultural hub. Um, so they take this planet, but it's interesting how they do because in this planets have planetary shields, and so basically what they do is they take one of the smaller dreadnoughts with a cloaking shield, get it inside the planetary shield, and make it appear like the Star Destroyer is able to fire straight through the shield, striking the planet below. And this causes the planet to pretty much immediately surrender because their defenses are like worthless, seemingly, against the Empire. And so this is kind of a little bit of a driving force with the whole New Republic thing because they're trying to figure out, okay, what is this new super weapon Thrawn's got?
Yeah. And this is obviously the cloaking force, the shield or whatever, that Thrawn got from the Mount Tantus earlier when they first went there in the first book. So kind of
Hmm.
tying all this together, this is how his plan in the long run starts to. to pan out. Um, Obviously, they do end up figuring out later when they use the same style of attack on Coruscant. Later on, they do attack Coruscant. And it is interesting because in that, or at this point in time, Thrawn even makes the comment. He says, "These people are not like fighters. They're not warriors. So that's why they give up so much easier." He said, "If I were to do this on something that's actually like, has military minds there, it wouldn't take them long to figure out what happened, and so it wouldn't work as effectively." But he still ends up trying it to an extent when he attacks Coruscant, which is an
Mm.
interesting thing.
Now, another thing, I think this happens a few chapters later, but it still is very early on in the book. But another interesting thing, so, um, Sabaoth has basically claimed the Empire for himself. So there's a lot of tension between Sabaoth and Thrawn. It was building in the last book. There's a lot more in this book. Um, because Sabaoth is basically, ironically, thinks Thrawn is incompetent, and he's trying to basically steal the Empire from Thrawn. And there's an interesting conversation too, because Sabaoth is able to influence Pelion. Because Thrawn obviously always has Islamari around him, so uh, Sabaoth really has no power over Thrawn. But there's a few times where he gets Pelion alone and is able to influence Pelion, and he gets
Very
Pelion.
interesting, very
Hmm?
interesting ways that they're portrayed. Because obviously this is like Jedi mind tricks. This is,
Mm,
controlling someone with the Force. It was very cool to see that portrayed out in a book
mm.
form.
But the important thing that comes from this is during one of Sabaoth and Pelion's interactions, Sabaoth tells Pelion to get the Mount Tantus facility to make a clone out of one of the samples stored in Mount Tantus. We'll get back to that. But if like, I don't know if about you, Wesley, I pretty much immediately like, oh, okay, that's what when they that's what this is. Yeah. Um.
Um, I honestly forgot about all of that until they got to the end of the last fight. Once that happened, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I remember all this happening, but it took me a lot longer to
Yeah.
remember that stuff.
In the well, like I said, I read the book in 2 days. Um. But no, when I was listening to it, I got to that point in the book where um Sabaoth tells Pelion to make this special clone. I was like, yeah, okay, I know what this is gonna be, and we're gonna
I
leave y'all
figured
in
it
suspense about
was,
what this actually is, but um,
yeah, I must say, I figured it was in that right line. I wasn't on track with specifically who the clone was of,
yeah,
but
partially because I knew this was a thing in Legends. I didn't know it was from the Thrawn trilogy, but I knew this was a thing in Legends. Um,
yeah, yeah. So there's a bunch of different threads to follow throughout this book, but the main points of it, I think if we real quick recap what happens to Luke, then we can jump into all the events on Coruscant, then we can jump to all the events on Wayland, tie in a couple of the ones that happen throughout the empires and stuff, and then we should be mostly good with this story.
mm.
Now,
So yeah, most bulk of it takes place on Coruscant. That's where
Yeah.
most of the actual story happens. But
So
um,
as we mentioned before, this book starts out with Luke looking for the cloning facility.
mhm.
Um, so he meets up with Talon Card. They end up talking for a little bit. I don't think that that meeting goes exactly how Skywalker would have wanted it to, but you know, it's more or less fine. Then he goes to some other planets, evades some capture, whatever. But
So
he's working his way back to Coruscant, at this point, but he has to take a detour because he needs to basically fuel up, needs power cells. So,
yeah.
where, David, does he go?
Well, that's an interesting question because I mean, it kind of depends on where in the galaxy he is. Um, I don't know. Where does he end up?
Dang, I thought you were going to take it from here. So, anyways, he goes to Honaker. It is a planet that his sister, we all know who that is, Leia, programs into his computer, into his nav computer, just before he left. And he was like, well, hey, let me go visit the Nogri people, because why not? Also, most of the planets out here where I'm at are going to be occupied by the Empire anyways, so why not
Mm,
go to one that I know that at least the people will accept me? And so he goes there,
mm,
goes to the Nogri home world, and then he goes to this place that they have built called the Future of the Nogri. It is a little, like, kind of encapsulated area in the mountains, kind of hidden away. Um, Easy to, I guess, destroy if need be, where the Nogri people are trying to rebuild their world from this little area.
mm,
And none of that's like particularly important. He stays there for a little while he gets his stuff taken care of, and they show him the same respect they did Leia. And then, you know, we kind of go from there to he gets back to goes heads on back to Coruscant. Now, during this time, he does have some visions of stuff happening with um, Leia and the birth of the twins, which is an important thing to follow. But we'll talk about that when we uh, start recapping the events that happen on Coruscant.
mm.
Um, but yeah, after
So,
that, he basically just goes back to Coruscant and meets up with the rest of everybody.
mm. So one interesting thing that I thought of when Luke was on Honaker, which gets answered later in the book. We'll get to that. I know I keep saying that, but um, one thing I thought of was if the Nogri are loyal to Luke and Leia now, the children of Vader, what about Rook? Rook is Thrawn's personal bodyguard, and he's also a Nogri, but it never
Hmm.
really gives any impression whether or not he's like still loyal to Thrawn or if he's uh like on the side of his people.
We also wonder within all this, like how he would find out about all this without Thrawn finding out about all this, which that doesn't get answered. But
No.
um, we do find out his loyalties later on near the end of the book. Um, but for the beginning, this book, they start out, I think, on Coruscant. Either that or they jump to Coruscant relatively quickly. And we get to see Mara there. We get to see Gint there. Gint has been loving being around the castle there on Coruscant. Apparently, he's been hacking into about everything he can. Those things include He's basically programmed himself a security card to get around wherever he wants to go. Later on during a battle, he is in the war room, which is only allowed for classified people. So he's sliced his way into that. He ends up finding the source for Delta Source, or the where it's like transmitting from, or whatever,
Mm.
something along those lines. Um, he ends up hacking in to the records for card so that they can be put in on payroll a little underhandedly. So he's having a blast there doing all this stuff. Um, then Mara's kind of ready to leave. Mara's ready to leave. She's been there long enough. She was sleeping through most of it, but she's been there long enough. And there's a point in time when she's talking to Winter, because Winter and Leia are all like, "Yeah, we'll try our best to get you a ship as soon as possible." Obviously, that those are stretched thin, but we'll try and get you one as soon as possible. There's a moment later on where they find out about her past,
Mm.
and it's interesting to see just like how little that affects their opinion of her. Like we've seen it from Luke. You know, throughout all of this. And it kind of was a little bit like, oh yeah, Luke is the only one that knows about this. I forgot. But it doesn't change their opinion of her either. Like they do some looking into her just to make sure she's okay. But like Leia has no change in how she views Mara after this. Like they're still trying to get her a ship. They're still trying to help her out, because of all she's done for them at this point. But um obviously later on, um, when it's revealed more so that to more people that she was one of the emperor's, or was the emperor's hand, uh, she does end up getting placed under house arrest. So not everyone is as forgiving as the Skywalkers are, but um, it is interesting to see just how, and it might just be the Jedi way that they've, kind of adopted because Leia has been trained a little bit in this area. But it's interesting to see just how like calm and peaceful they are in this area
Mm.
with with it. You know,
Yeah. Um, Han is somewhere. I don't remember.
Han's a little over the place in this book. Not really anything too specific. He's kind of just bouncing around, like he's helping Lando out whenever he's trying to get those ships. He's helping Leia out when she's having the babies. Which I want to mention this. So later on, sometime in this, Leia ends up having the babies that she's been carrying for the past two books.
Mm.
Twins, we've already known that. Jaina and Jason Solo. But she has a 10-hour delivery. This is her first child. These are her first, okay? She's never had
Mm.
kids before, right? 10 hours is good time normally. 10 hours is extremely good for your first. For twins, I mean, they have super medicine here. So I think Sarah was about 12 hours, and they said that the nurses in the room said she progressed, or like it was like as if this was her second child. So apparently she did really good for it being her first time. But 10 hours, that's kind of crazy. Um, I mentioned it to Sarah, and maybe she was like, yeah, it is what it is. It's not, too crazy. I think it's a little crazy. I mean, 10 hours of labor is still a long time, but anyways. But she has her two twins, and Han is able to be there, so that's good because that was something I
Mm.
think at one point in the books they were talking about. Luke is nowhere to be found, but he's still trying to get back, so
But
not his fault.
at this point, Luke is still on Hanukkah.
Yeah, he only can do so much.
Yeah.
Um, But anyways, it was funny though to listen to the different events that like Han and Leia were having to go through with all of this. Kind of like, oh, hey, I've been through that relatively recently. So,
Mm,
um, but yeah, I think throughout this, like Han is mostly just kind of helping out in area. I don't think he really comes into the book in a prominent role until the end when they go to Wayland. I'm
mm,
pretty sure, if I remember correctly, he's kind of silent up until that point. Um, there is a point where uh, Sabayoth is still wanting the twins. He is still wanting Leia. And so Thrawn sends in a special force tech team. No, yeah, tech team, correct?
yep.
Tech team to infiltrate the castle and uh, going through a back door, sneak in. They're supposed to. I thought they were supposed to silence Mara Jade, not just discredit her. I thought they were supposed to silence her. That was my impression. Apparently, they were supposed to discredit her, and then they were supposed to kidnap the twins. Now, another thing that I feel like is a little bit misleading in this book, and I don't understand necessarily, they never answer this, but they said Delta Source let them in the secret way, right? Now, I guess Delta Source could have been the way that they found that out, but that made me think that Delta Source was a person. A little
Mm,
misleading there.
yeah. Um. So this is before it's actually, discrediting is actually how Mara Jade ends up getting um put in under house arrest. But
Mhm.
so this is before then, and Mara Jade actually helps save Leia and Han and the twins because they're in their bedchambers when the Imperial task force gets there. Um, but Mara Jade is able to, because she, obviously knows the Imperial Palace. She was the Emperor's hand. Um, she's able to use some of the passageways to get around the blockade that the Imperials had set up in the hallway. I was able to get to the room to basically um save Leia, Han, and the twins, and Winter too.
Don't forget about Winter. Don't forget about
Yeah.
Delta Source in disguise. I'm still
Hmm.
not convinced. Still not convinced. She's a little too sweet
Right.
on the outside.
Right.
She
Now,
looks too innocent.
now this moment when Leia, Han, the twins, and Winter are in uh their room, trying to barricade the door and stuff while the Imperials are trying to break their way in, is what Luke sees in a dream on Hanukkah. And this is why he wants to go back to Coruscant. And so
Yeah,
he starts heading back at this point. Um, so after the Imperial attack on the Imperial Palace, the only Imperial left is or left alive was the um commander, and he was the one who basically told the New Republic, he's like, yeah, Mara Jade's the one who let us in,
yeah,
and that's how Mara Jade ends up getting put under arrest.
yeah. And because at this point, I think he also reveals the information that she was the Emperor's hand. So,
Hmm.
she's been with the Empire before. You can find those records. Well, you may not be able to find records, but there's evidence of that, and this and that. Now, everyone, all of the good guys are vouching for her and saying, "Hey, don't do this. what are we doing? Like, why are we going to trust this? And they said, well, we have to at least have precaution with it, which is kind of understandable. Now, before we get to the next thing, we probably should talk about the attack and why there's an attack. But the attack on Coruscant, which I guess would start um with the Empire side of things.
Well, so the actual attack doesn't start for a while. Um, but basically, well, we actually need to hop over and talk about Talon Card a little bit here.
That's true. That's true.
So, Talon Card, as Wesley mentioned earlier, is trying to help get information for the New Republic. Help is kind of a loose term. It's like 50% helping, 50% selling the information. Um,
They make a reference a little bit later how I think it's Card's mind um how he remembers seeing the smuggler that was Han Solo slowly turn into the general of the, New Republic that he ends up becoming. Um, and, we kind of see a little bit of that transformation here in some sense. With Card more and more being less neutral and more on a specific side, he is still trying to get a payday out of it. But he is actually less concerned about the payday than later on. Later on, some of his associates are.
hmm, yeah, he's trying to a little bit trying to like I think by the end of the book he is like very this is the right thing to do. But
Yeah,
at this point he's still in this mindset of like, okay, that that they're on the right side, but I can still make a profit from this.
exactly. Yeah.
Um so he gets together with a bunch of other smugglers and just basic lowlifes in the galaxy to basically make an alliance to spy on the Empire for the New Republic. And he has this whole idea where he wants to get Ghent to, basically start paying them under the table for information. Hacking the New Republic system to pay them under the table, so they don't even have to make a deal with the New Republic. Um, so technically, stealing from the New Republic, but giving them information to make it worse. Um,
Yeah.
but
Now the way that this all ends up happening, or at least there's a big meeting where he gets together a bunch of these smugglers. The way that ends up happening is Card is off to somewhere and he runs into um, his old friend, his old smuggler friend, Gillespie. Anyways, um, and this guy has just been run off of his world. Well, not necessarily run off, but just escaped from his planet. He retired, bought some land, the dream after being a smuggler for years. You retire, you buy a bunch of land, and you farm it for the rest of your life, whatever. Well, his planet got attacked by the Empire. Actually, was the planet from earlier that was the farming planet. Whatever the name of that one was. Uh, was that?
I don't remember the name
Huh?
of the planet. Let me see if I can find it.
Anyways, he's from that planet that the Empire got at the beginning of the book with the food supplies and everything like that. But he left as soon as he could and got out of there so he wouldn't be under the Imperial hand. But they're chasing him, and so anyways, they have a little brief conversation, and they talk about having um a meetup in a couple days, let the word out for all the top smugglers to meet on Trogan, which is the name of the planet that I'm seeing here, for where they end up meeting. So these smugglers that end up coming are among the ones, let's see, Brazik, Bailey, Parta, Elor, Dravis, Mazik, Lishma, Gillespie, how do you say that? And none other than Niles Ferrier. David, you remember that name, right?
Yeah, yeah, he's the ship thief.
Yeah. Yes, he is. Not someone that we all probably want around. Uh, but nonetheless, he is around, and he is a part of these little smuggler meetings. Now, about halfway through the pitch, actually, he might have been mostly done with his pitch. Um, okay, now I remember. After he gets done with his pitch, Card gets done with his pitch, a lot of the different smugglers are starting to say, no, we don't want to be a part of this. The Empire has no interest in us. I am of the opinion we should all just disband and go about our business. If we do dealings with the Empire, if we do dealings with the Republic, we're all businessmen. We just want to make money. And Card is losing them. And then all of a sudden, there is an attack by the Empire on this little meeting, and one of the characters die. Let's see, Lishma's death. Lishma. So one of the smugglers named Lishma died. I think maybe one other person there dies. This ends up taking this group of smugglers who had no interest and thought that they were out from under. They were not on the Empire's radar. Now they're like, oh, the Empire is after us. Let's band together. Let's do this card. We're in. So it
Mhm.
turns out, Niles Ferrier is not a good dude because he actually was the guy behind the attack. Uh, he's also not a smart dude because Thrawn is very, very, very upset with Ferrier for orchestrating this attack. Because not only did a lot of the troopers die, um, it also caused the smugglers to band together, which is something Carr did not want done. He was going to leave it alone, let it dissolve itself, and then,
Mhm.
not have to worry about it. Well, now it's something else that Thrawn has to worry about. And, so now he is using Farrier even more so than he has in the past books to try and do certain things because
Yeah.
Farrier basically owes him a debt.
So now that Card has all these smugglers kind of with him, working with him, they pull several well, basically raids on the Empire. One of which is on a Imperial shipyard. They're able to blow up a Star Destroyer that's being built. Um, but another interesting thing that Card notes is that in this shipyard there are a bunch of asteroids, and that's important for later on. Um, Now kind of where this I'm just gonna go ahead and bring this plot line to its conclusion, just to kind of or
Because,
until
in
it
all honesty,
merges with the
it
others.
doesn't go anywhere.
No. So basically, this plot line kind of its climax gets to the point where it's Thrawn and Farrier basically are trying to frame Hard for the attack on that initial meeting for hiring the um Imperial Battalion commander. Basically to discredit Thrawn or discredit Card to disband this group of smugglers from, messing with Thrawn's stuff. And through all this, Farrier inevitably makes a mistake when he's trying to accuse Card. Basically, I think it's Mazik. Thrawn kind of gets the idea in Mazik's head that Thrawn was, I don't know why I keep mixing those names up. That Card was behind the attack.
Yeah.
Um, and so he initiates the accusation against Card, and then Farrier, of course, steps in and is, all like, "Oh yeah, it's all your fault," But then he slips up.
It's real interesting. They even make the comment about it. How like Kari is such a laid back, chill, and even in a lot of the ways, very similar to Thrawn, and how calculating and like how he can plan a little bit ahead. And it's interesting to see just like Card Card gets Farrier to slip up in what he's saying. You know, he understands and realizes that Farrier is not exactly the fastest thinker out there. It's not what he's built for. He's more built for running his head through a wall. But
Mm,
anyways, so yeah, it's not incredibly difficult for him to get
yeah.
Farrier to slip up, and it was
So
very interesting scene to see that unfold.
so what happens is Farrier has his wraith plant a hollow disc on in Thrawn, or I don't know, I keep doing that, in
On the
Card's office on the wild card. Um, Basically, it's a receipt of Card paying off this Imperial commander from this
yeah
battalion on that planet. Um, and so there's this whole exchange where all the smugglers go to the wild card because Mazik is suspicious of Card because of what Thrawn said. So they're looking through Card's holotapes. And by this point, Card has already picked up on or realized that Farrier's wraith has been on his ship because they had an intruder alert on the wild card and couldn't find anyone. So he puts pieces together. Oh, so the wraith planted something here. He's trying to get Farrier to slip up, and then the the smugglers who are going through all the holotapes announce that they have found something, and Farrier immediately jumps to, um, oh, you found the receipt of him paying off the commander. He when in all reality, Farrier shouldn't have known that that's what they found unless he planted it, because he did plant it.
yeah. So then he ends up just basically saying, "All right, I did it. Now, Card, come with me. I'm gonna kill you and get out of here." And yada yada yada. So that obviously goes sideways for him. And does Farrier die?
I think his ship does get shot down. I don't think they say whether or not he dies, but I think his ship, because he
Well,
escapes
because
to his ship. He escapes to his ship, and then one of Mazik's company's ships chases after him and shoots it down.
Well, do we know what planet it was? Because this here says he dies in 9 ABY, which probably would be around the right time, right? 5 years after return.
Yeah, yeah,
Above Hyjarna.
yeah. So that would have been it.
So he supposedly dies at this point. He's probably a special character made for this. So not too much outside of this one appearance for him. All right, well, so that kind of wraps up that story. Card comes back in and helps out a little bit towards the end of the book, but that kind of wraps up this.
Now we jumped a little bit ahead of this, but an important thing we need to talk about here. So it's back on Coruscant. So there is another big important plot point that happens before the Battle of Coruscant. So while in prison, Mara finds out about the clones. She was in a coma for a month, and since waking up, she hadn't heard anything about the clones. And when she hears about the clones, her mind immediately goes to, oh, the Emperor had RT cloning cylinders in his vault on Wayland. But of course, he doesn't actually know where Wayland is. He can find it, but she doesn't know the coordinates. So she tells Leia that all this. Leia is a little bit hesitant to believe her. Um, but inevitably ends up believing her because Luke gets there and uh basically convinces Leia to believe her. And so basically it comes to a point where the only way that they can find Wayland is to break Mara Jade out of prison.
Which is what uh so they're still dealing with the leak at this point.
Mm,
So what Leia does is she decides to get only the most trusted people together. So she gets um Han, Chewie, Luke, Lando, um, Winter, and that's it. All in a room, and they have a meeting. In this meeting, that's when they decide that they have to break Mara out and get her to Wayland. Because not only does she need a nav computer, she's also going to have to help them figure out where they're at on the planet. Because she
mm,
doesn't know that either. So they decide to do this. Well, then you have to figure out, well, who's going to do what? Because Chewie is kind of torn in two here. Leia can't really go. Han wants to go. Luke says he'll go by himself, but nobody really wants to let Luke go by himself with the one person who said that she would kill him. Um, so what ends up happening is Luke, Han, Lando all break
and
Mara
Chewie.
out and take her. Yeah, Chewie too. Chewie too. Now, why is it okay for Chewie to go on this? Because he was having the issue because he has to protect life debt extends from Han to Leia, but now also to the twins. So he has a lot of people to protect at this point. So how can he do all this? How is he okay doing all of this?
Well, it's pretty simple actually. Um, Leia is being protected by the Nogri on Coruscant.
Yes. Yes. So the no Greek come down just as Straw was. And I didn't realize they were that short.
Yeah, the Nogri into the Imperial Palace just as Jawas, and they're there to protect Leia while the others go off to Wayland. Um, an important thing that we did gloss over the last two books is that Mara is constantly hearing the voice of the Emperor, and is constantly having nightmares about that day, the day when Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader killed the Emperor. Of course,
I find it.
it's from it's not
Go ahead.
exactly what happened, because in her dreams Vader and Luke team up against the Emperor and kill him out of hatred, when that's not actually what happened.
Yeah. Now, but she does find out about that later.
Mm.
But
But
before we get to
the
that,
but the important thing with me bringing that up is she's constantly hearing the voice of the Emperor telling her that you will kill Luke Skywalker.
now the interesting thing with that is, so we get that this has obviously been something that we have been hearing, and she's been dealing with a lot within this trilogy. But we see this is the first book where we get to see, outside of that, the Jedi mind control aspect, right?
Mm,
So, like, why is this so, like, she basically says she doesn't have a choice. She has to do what the Emperor says. Well, why is that? Well, this was the Emperor's, they mention it later on, this was the Emperor's last command to her.
mm,
He left an impression on her mind. The Emperor was extremely powerful in the Force. He is basically, he basically left it where she has to kill Luke Skywalker.
mm,
Like, she won't have a choice to. Now, near the end of the book, um, a lot of things clicked, because I do remember hearing a lot of the stuff in canon, or in Legends, sorry. Um, but it's very interesting to see how they go about dealing with all of that, because
mm,
it's not like she necessarily likes Luke at this point. She sees the usefulness of him, and she also doesn't necessarily, like, deep down, she doesn't really want to kill him at this point, but she knows she has to,
mm,
because it's destiny or whatever. And Luke hasn't really fought her on that. He's like, well, help me with this, and we can deal with you killing me later. You know,
mm,
it's like the reverse of sleep well and I'll most likely kill you in the morning. It's sleep well and you might kill me in the morning. Princess Bride. Anyways, but
yeah.
yes, she's dealing with all that. I did mention it a minute ago, but yeah, we've never really dove into much of
Yeah.
why she.
So anyway, um, yeah, successfully break uh Mara Jade out and on their way to Wayland. Now, that storyline kind of takes a little bit of a backseat for a while, because it is the one of the main, or pretty much the main, like, storyline, but a lot more happens like Coruscant for after this, and it kind of takes a backseat because they're traveling to Wayland. When they get to Wayland, they're having to travel on foot to get to Mount Tantus. So
It's
not
about a.
not a
I think they say it's about a 14-day journey. It ends up
yeah,
being closer to.
yeah. So not a whole lot of that is super relevant. Um, they end up making allies with the natives on Wayland.
And the
And
reason that they
then,
end up making allies with them is because Leia, no, not Leia, one of the Nogri told one of his other Nogri commanders, to follow Han to protect him because
mm,
they owe a life debt to Leia and to what do they call Han?
the consort of the Lady Vader.
Yes, consort of Lady Vader. So they owe a
Yeah.
life debt to him as well. So they don't want to let him out of it. I mean, like, it's a different thing for Chewie. Not really. I mean, these are basically just the life debts in different terms for the
Mm,
Nogri. But anyway, so they send that out, and eventually, I mean, that's a real good thing because they gain allies, extra allies with the Nogri, and they also gain allies with the native people there.
yeah.
But
So we'll put a pause on that one for now because all that jumps way ahead compared to
and wraps everything
where we
up.
are in the Coruscant storyline. So we need to catch that up, and then we'll hop back to this. Um,
Exactly. Yep.
so after they leave, there's a bunch of political drama with Leia and stuff. With because she basically tells the council that yeah, we broke Mara Jade out of prison, and this is why.
Which I really like it's kind of funny, because they talk about it when they're talking about breaking her out. And I think Han makes the comment how like, oh, this is all illegal stuff or whatever. And it's like, we were used to be a part of the rebellion. Like we did illegal stuff on a daily basis. So why is this any different? And, I'm not saying that, anyone should go out there and do anything illegal. But it's funny how in these movies, how like we are on the side of the heroes because they're the heroes, despite the fact that they are doing things that if it was in the real world, we probably would be against it, you know? Just because we understand the reasoning of it in the actual, these movies and good and evil is a little more black and white in this. But it was kind of funny because it's like, yeah, the New Republic for the most part is comprised of a bunch of people who used to be rebels, who used to be you know, galactic terrorists, if you want to
Mm.
call them that. So,
And
obviously them doing this is nothing too
and
new.
so you have two almost like two kind of very different opinions about some of the stuff, or actually three really. Um, in the New Republic government itself. So you've got Bel Iblis, which he has been a bigger character in this book. We've kind of glossed over a bunch of his stuff. He helped when the Imperial Tech team invaded the palace and stuff, and he does a lot more in the future here. But he's kind of this voice of reason in the New Republic government of like, okay, now you know what you did might not necessarily be right, and you didn't necessarily go about it the right way, but I understand your reasoning.
Yeah.
Like
And
that's kind of
also like
his.
one point too that Leia tries to get across is that with Delta Source being an issue, they didn't know who they could trust, and
Mm,
they wanted to keep it where Mara, for as long as possible, was thought to still be in prison here.
yeah,
So, there obviously are a lot of reasons behind it. Mon Mothma's not very happy about all this, but
mm,
it eventually just kind of gets swept underneath the rug, and they act
yeah,
as if Mara's still there. Now, the
yeah,
important
because
thing to get through here is we need to get to the attack
yeah.
because we are about that time now.
So this is where those asteroids that I mentioned, Talon Card took note of come into play. Because the
Before we get to
main
that, why is the Empire attacking Coruscant?
Um, well, basically, it's to get Coruscant out of the war for now.
Well, it's also because, well, it's not Thrawn's idea behind it, but it's originally something that Sabaoth
Right,
says he
right.
wants done because he wants to go there and get the twins.
Mhm,
In
right.
Thrawn's eyes, he wants Coruscant out of the war.
Yeah. I was thinking of Thrawn's plan, because at this point, Sabaoth has gone to Wayland. Gone back to
Yeah, right
Wayland.
before they end up leaving, yeah, Sabaoth ends up going to Wayland, doesn't go to Coruscant, and so Thrawn just ends up doing his own thing
Yeah.
with his plan.
So, there's that, yes. Um, so on the ground during this attack, there's a whole bunch of, again, bunch of political drama. Um, in the war room, and as you mentioned, Gent was able to sneak his way in there, so he's here and stuff. Um, but basically, the whole point of all this is Bel Iblis kind of, uh, or what Mon Mothma asking Bel Iblis to take over the defense of Coruscant,
Yes.
which is a really big deal because uh, basically, as I don't know if we dive too much into it in the last book, but Mon Mothma and Bela Bliss have a history, and there's not necessarily they're not necessarily on good terms.
Yeah.
Um, but this kind of takes a step to reconciling that. Anyway, Ron's big plan with all this is to release cloaked asteroids into orbit around Coruscant. And Wesley, what does this accomplish?
Well, you know how earlier they had used the cloaking device to basically act like they were penetrating the shield. Well, that's what they attempted to do here, or in theory, we're going to do. But Bail Iblis and his team caught on to that beforehand, so Thrawn kind of switched it up a little bit, and maybe even like ahead of time knowing that they would catch on to this, and made it look like they released a bunch of these out into the atmosphere, causing Coruscant to not be able to drop their shields once they left until they were able to find out where all these different asteroids were and take them out of commission.
Mhm. Yeah. So that's
And they think
why
that they're and they think there's like 270 or 90 or some they give some number, but it's like up in the 200s is how many they think are out there.
when in reality there's only like 22.
Yeah,
But of course, you can't drop your shields and you can't have ships taking off from Coruscant because you don't know if you're going to hit an asteroid or if an asteroid's going to hit
exactly.
the planet. So Coruscant's out of the war for now. But
Yep.
an important thing is revealed, or Bent reveals an important thing to Leia during the battle. So apparently Gint was able to hack the signal from Delta Source. So he knows exactly what Delta Source is sending Thrawn. So Leia
Now they just got to figure
Winter,
out how to
yeah,
track it down.
yeah. So Leia Winter, Gint, and Bel Iblis start working on basically tracking down Delta Source using what Delta Source is sending out and basically having conversations around the palace, where people can hear, trying to um basically pin down where Delta Source is coming from. Because of course Winter has this photographic memory. She knows who all's around when they're having these discussions, so they're able to weed out any potential suspects and uh, basically create their own suspects.
Mhm.
But what's the problem with this, Wesley?
Well, the problem ends up being that essentially there no one person could be Delta Source. When they run
Hmm.
it through the machine and the algorithm and everything, no one person could be Delta Source. You could say maybe one of their aides could be, but that doesn't really work out too well either. So then they think, well, maybe it's a group. Well, that doesn't really work out either because they don't want to believe that that many people could be traitors to the
So,
New Republic.
so that means that it's a droid.
Hmm. But droids are a little bit difficult because they all kind of look the same. I mean, Winter obviously has a photographic memory, but knowing what the droid is what is a little bit harder to do. So what they end up doing, well, actually, before I get to that, they also discuss the fact that a droid would be a little bit harder to have as a source and a traitor because of the intelligence sweeps that they do. These things would pick up on any software in a droid, anything along those lines. So what they end up doing is they go and find out that while they can't pinpoint a person, they can pinpoint an area that all the information that they've been giving is getting resent from. It's like the main corridor or something like that, the main hall area
Yeah.
where like all the people meet up after they've gone to their or before and after their
You know,
meetings.
it's an interesting thing too, because I thought it was kind of interesting in the first book. They described this like, kind of early on in the first book, but there's apparently these trees in this main hall that um change color and stuff. It's kind of interesting.
Hmm. Yeah, well, that's not important. So, anyways, so they go to this little area here, and what they're doing is they're trying to watch out for any droids that they know when the intelligence counterintelligence sweep is going to be coming. So, what they do is they decide that they are going to watch, and any droids that try to leave, they're going to go and see if these maybe are the ones that have been avoiding the counterintelligence sweeps. So they get there. And, well, nothing happens. Another dead end.
So if it's not a person, it's not a group of people, it's not a droid, then who could it be? Unless it's a person that's inside of the group that's looking for the source.
See, that's my theory. But they didn't like that. So instead, they decided to go with something stupid.
Or what if it's not droid, but it's also not a person?
Well, what does that leave?
A listening device.
Well, yeah, but the counterintelligence would pick up on any listen devices.
Well, maybe not. What if it was unconventional?
How unconventional.
Well, what if I told you that those trees that I mentioned aren't
The not important
unimportant?
ones?
What?
The unimportant trees? The
Yeah,
unimportant
what
trees?
what if I mentioned that they're not so unimportant?
Well, that's impossible because it's in their name.
Yeah. Well, you see, the trees, as mentioned in Heir to the Empire, change color when they react to sound.
Mhm.
And one thing that the Empire had set up, or presumably the Emperor had set up, because it wasn't in any of the Imperial um databases or anything. But basically, down in the root system of these trees, they had these devices that could decode all these reactions that the tree made to the sound, and then it would transmit it off-world. Trees are delta source,
Yep. Yep. That was
which
something
honestly,
that is. So
I did not see that coming.
I don't know
I
if
don't
you
know if
could
it,
see it coming.
yeah, again, I guess there was some foreshadowing to it because, um, like I said, Timothy Zahn did make a point to describe trees in Heir to the Empire,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's not one of those things that you really think much of when you're reading it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm okay with that. I don't know how it would have gone for like I said winter to be a to be Delta Source. I don't really know how that would be. So I'm okay with this. It is what it is. I didn't see it coming. I did feel a little let down because it seemed like all this anticipation and then it wasn't really anyone. It was just plants. So,
Mm,
I was expecting more drama with the trader being an actual something. But either way, it was what it was, and that's what we got. Now,
yeah, because I feel like on purpose it kind of made in the last book, like it made you think it was like failure, even though I never really thought it was failure,
yeah, I never thought it'd be a failure. He just
but
seemed, and they
it,
mentioned
it
this a
kind of
lot. He just seemed like power hungry.
yeah, but you know what I'm saying, like in Darkness Rising, you kind of get a few moments where you're like, I wonder if Phalia is Delta Source, but more so in this book, it was probably intentional. You get the feeling like, what if Winter is Delta Source?
Yeah, yeah. So, but Delta Source is actually a bunch of trees. All
Yep.
right, David, we've been talking for, let's see, about an hour and a half. So we've met our quota. So we need to wrap this up, but we got a very, very important part of the story to talk about.
Yeah. So
The invasion of Mount Tantus after they found Wayland.
yes. So they finally get to Mount Tantus. Now, so it's kind of an important thing that happens here. So obviously, they need to destroy the Spinarty cloning cylinders. But Jarua Sabaoth is waiting for Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade
Why couldn't they sense them beforehand, though? You'd think that they'd be able to do that.
because this facility is full of Islamari, which is one thing, again, we forgot to mention. The reason Thrawn is able to grow these clones so fast, because he's able to grow these clones in just a matter of a few weeks. The reason he's able to grow these clones so fast is the effect of the Islamari to push back the Force.
Yeah.
Basically, growing these clones separate from the Force, he's able to grow them faster without creating clone madness.
Now, I wonder how that works with. So there's they talk about, we obviously have the clone of Sabayoth, and then we also have him talk about how they talk about later on wanting to clone Sabayoth's clone. Now that would be a little different because you don't need to have speed involved. But if you want to clone a force sensitive clone in this line of thought, can you do it using the Islamari? Or would it being detached from the force in its birth cause it to be detached from the force in life too?
Well, they kind of already answer this question because so I forget exactly why, but reasons. I forget exactly why. It's been a few weeks. Anyway, Luke and Mara go off on their own, separate from Han, Lando, and Chewie, and they end up in the Emperor's throne room inside of Mount Tantus. And of course, this is where Jerua Sabaoth is waiting for them. And so, in an effort to turn Sabaoth is kind of given up on Luke. He thinks Luke is too much of his own, of his own Jedi to actually control. So he's kind of turned his sights to Mara Jade. But he still needs Luke to get taken care of. And this is where it's revealed what that sample that he wanted a clone made of was. Because Luke ends up fighting Luke. Yes, so the sample that Sabaoth mentioned earlier was the hand that Luke lost on Bespin.
So in this Legends trilogy that takes place after the Return and all that stuff, in this trilogy, the hand turns up, which I guess the lightsaber does too. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
and then in the one that is currently canon, his lightsaber turns up, and it plays like a
Yeah,
big role.
yeah. So that's another thing. The lightsaber is also in the possession of Luke.
Yep.
So Luke goes off and fights Luke, while Sabaoth tries to turn Mara Jade. And so there's this whole fight scene playing out here, um, kind of reminiscent of Jedi, um,
Mhm.
because you've got the Emperor type character, like throne room fight scene. That's why I said it's kind of reminiscent. Um, but throughout a bunch of this, um, Mara Jade ends up getting away from Sabaoth, and I'm glossing over some here. It's not super important to the story, but the big important thing to the story in this fight scene, or in this whole sequence, is the fact that Mara Jade is the one to kill this clone of Luke Skywalker.
Hmm. So, David, real quick, I want to mention this because I don't know when this concept art was drawn, but this is some concept art, and it's the duel, and they're standing at the bottom of some steps. Sabaoth is at the top, and Mara is like in front of them, like towards the camera angle or whatever. Uh, but you have Luke as we see him in his black robes, green lightsaber, like we see in him in Return. And then, as he's described in the book, he's wearing brown robes. So in this, he's wearing brown robes. It looks very similar to the brown robes that Anakin wears
Hmm.
in Revenge, which, when you put it in that sense, it's like not only is he fighting himself, but he's also, and obviously, like you said, this is a very reminiscent fight of Return, anyways. But it's like another fight between Luke and Anakin, kind of a deal, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, but like I said, Mara Jade is the one who to deal this final blow to Luke, or the clone of Luke Skywalker, basically fulfilling this command that the Emperor gave her. And there's this thing where she mentions like the voice of the Emperor, telling her to kill Luke Skywalker is gone after this.
Mhm. Yep.
Um,
Now,
And so,
Sabaoth isn't exactly happy at this point. He's actually
no,
pretty mad.
no.
So he
And so,
starts,
go ahead.
well, he starts basically throwing the ceiling down on top of all of them because,
Hmm.
well, he wants to kill them all. And so he's sitting here throwing the ceiling down, and Mara and Luke are, and well, all of them really are getting pummeled by it. We did forget to mention this, but Leia and Card find out that Sabath is at the Mount Tantus facility. They also find out that the Islamari are there, and so they go to Wayland to warn them. Uh,
Hmm.
so anyways, they're here at this point in time. And so they're all getting rocks thrown on them. But actually, it turns out Mara is cutting holes or whatever on the floor to let the rocks drain through. Because at this point, like Luke is up to his like knees or thighs up in rocks. Like it is getting kind of crazy here. Uh, and Sabath does not realize that the that Mara is more or less free over here, not buried underneath the rocks. And she ends up charging at Sabaoth, and through a couple swift blows, ends up being able to kill him
Hmm.
one way or another.
Yeah. And so they're able to dismantle the cloning facility and kill Sabaoth. But we're missing kind of an important thing here. Um,
That's what I was thinking.
where's Thrawn?
Well, see, there's a battle taking place, and Thrawn actually guessed right. In who in thinking that the rebels were going to trying to deceive him uh, and act like they were attacking this one base, but instead divert all their attention at this other base. And so he is right in coming to this one conclusion and is there to stop their attack. But he ends up actually getting betrayed by someone who's actually really close to him.
Hmm. Yeah, so somewhat, I don't know if it's necessarily ironic, but Root is the one to finally kill Thrawn.
Yep. It's kind of abrupt, too,
Yeah.
like we talked about earlier. This is a very abrupt ending because we have the whole sequence on Wayland, and then you're sitting there like, wait a minute, Thrawn's part of this too. What happened to him? And then they cut over, and the battle's happening over here. I don't think it would have gone well for Thrawn anyways, because I think at this point in time they were actually starting to lose because the smugglers were looking to attack this base anyways too. So the smugglers are kind of helping out the New Republic at this point. Thrawn wasn't thinking all that, factoring all that into it, and then uh, there's this scene here where Pelion gets, I think, his throat sliced. I think is how they describe I think he's sliced in the throat, and then
Mm.
he looks over and Thrawn has been stabbed in the chest and is bleeding out and dies. And it's very, very quick. And that's the
Hmm.
scene.
And
And
er,
I
it
don't
is kind
think
of
I don't think they say specifically that Pelion dies.
I don't think Hellion does. I will get into that later. Um, let's see here if I can find it because I do want to talk about this. Okay, so yeah, so this is the scene where um Rook betrays Thrawn and says Thrawn, or this is talking from Pellion's point of view. Um, Thrawn caught his eye, and to Pellion's astonishment, the Grand Admiral smiled. But, he whispered, it was so artistically done. Which is very Thrawn for his last words. Like,
Yes.
that kind of jumped out at me. Um, as Thrawn's last words, like, of course Thrawn would be impressed with how artistically uh, executed that this plan was.
Exactly. Yeah. Um, yeah. And like we mentioned, I don't think Pelion ends up dying here. They talk about like the light leaving Thrawn's eyes, so he is
Mm,
clearly dead. But
yeah.
Pelion, the officers come to him and they say, "What are we doing now?"
Mm,
And I don't even think they even say anything about what happens to Rook. Like, I guess he just leaves. I mean,
mm,
they wouldn't succeed in stopping him, but they don't
yeah.
even like touch on the fact of what happens with him.
Yeah.
So
But
they ask Pelion though what to do, and he says retreat. He
yeah,
says Thrawn would have been able to salvage this, but I am no Thrawn. So
yeah. So Alien, I do believe, does survive because uh at some point Grand Admiral Pelion is a character in Legends. So at some point he assumes the rank of Grand Admiral.
let's look this up. Gladdy, Gilad Pelion. Uh, so I'd assume. Huh, so there's a canon side to this character.
Oh, there is a canon side of the character. Interesting.
Interesting. So, okay, so this character has appeared. This might be a character who's appeared maybe in such. This looks like possibly he appeared in the Tales of the Empire with Morgan Elsbeth. That's what I think a clip or two. So that might be where we're seeing a lot of these different clips from here. It looks like he was in the council meeting with Moff Gideon during one of the, what's that, season 2 or 3 of Mandalorian. Yeah, so he is a canon character, but that's not exactly what I'm interested in currently. I'm more interested in to see what the ending of this character is on the legend side, because canon is still being written. Uh, so yeah, so he dies in 41 ABY.
So that's well after
Yes.
this.
He is a really old man because he was born in 51 BBY. He's an old dude.
That's like that's what, like 93 years? 94 years?
Yeah, crazy, crazy
Yeah.
time. Let's see. Death at Fonder. So he does uh yeah, so I guess it's just later on them still fighting the Empire. Which you think about that, right? He he like you said, he becomes a Grand Admiral, like assumes the role of Grand Admiral. They fight the Empire for a lot longer than you would think that they would need to.
Because there's still all these like Imperial fanatics that keep just, reassuming control of the of the Imperial remnant. Now,
Yeah.
before we get too far away from this, let's go ahead and finish up the story. Um, not really too much, but the last kind of important story beat here is at the very end of the book. Um, we get this scene on top of the Imperial Palace with Luke and Mara Jade, where Luke basically, so Mara tells Luke like the voice is gone, you know, like, basically I'm free, um, and Luke gives Mara the lightsaber, the one that he got back, the one that was originally lost on Bespin, Anakin's lightsaber. And that's where this story actually ends. It's it's kind of an interesting I don't know, interesting place to end this because it's not really like, and like I said again, there is two more books Timothy Zahn wrote that take place after the Thrawn Trilogy, and so potentially this is kind of where it what it deals with, but it kind of leaves more open here.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I understand that aspect of it. I said that it kind of seemed very abrupt of an ending. You know, I guess there is always the idea of there's more that could be said, and maybe there's more that is said and written and other things that we might need to look into. Um, but yeah, it's a very interesting ending,
Mm,
just at how quickly everything. I mean, we mentioned this how in like when we talked about Heirs of the Empire, Thrawn and the heroes never met. I don't think that there's a point in this book that they do meet face to face. They're in
I
these
don't think I
trilogies.
don't think anywhere in the trilogy they meet.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that
Yeah.
they meet at any point in time. Any of them, Hellion
Mm,
or Thrawn, which is
yeah.
interesting, and it's very well done. It's just an interesting choice that they don't even
Mm,
meet at the climax. Like Sabayoth being the Force user is the final battle, like the final boss. Like the only reason
yeah.
that the New Republic is able to beat the the Empire, not that they wouldn't. I think that obviously there still would have been problems with them beating the Empire one way or another. But like a lot of the driving force of these past couple books have been stuff that Sabayoth has wanted Thrawn to do with capturing the children and Leia and all that stuff. And obviously, Thrawn could focus more on his plans with Sabayoth gone, but I also think that they'd focus a lot more on Thrawn, one, with him not having the cloning facility, and two, not having Sabayoth as a detour. So,
Mm.
you know,
See, that was the biggest, honestly, of the whole trilogy. That was the biggest blunder Thrawn made. That might have been the only blunder Thrawn made was letting Sabaoth, uh, basically keeping Sabaoth alive and trying to work with him.
yeah,
If Thrawn had just ordered Sabaoth to be killed when they first got there to Wayland, they had the Islamari. They could have done it. If they just killed Sabaoth then and there, Thrawn may have won this whole thing.
yeah. I mean, obviously, you understand why he wanted to do that, because of the battle meditation essentially that he wanted to have. But honestly, it's kind of surprising that Thrawn wanted someone in that position, being how, I mean, obviously, I understand battle meditation is a thing not to specifically just coordinate your troops, but also give them like heightened awareness and senses and all that stuff. But with how genius Thrawn was and how little, honestly, they used uh um Sabaoth and how quickly he became a nuisance is one of those things where, yeah, if they had never done that, and if maybe he had a little more trust in himself to be able to use what they had, I think, yeah, you're right. You probably would have. It would have been a much different outcome.
Because think about this too. The whole reason why Thrawn even died is because he sent the Nogri after Leia
Yeah.
because that's what Sabaoth wanted.
Yep. If he
If he
never did
wasn't
that,
trying to, if
never
he
would have
wasn't
had the
trying to
Nogri
kidnap,
stuff.
yeah, if he wasn't trying to kidnap Leia, he never would have had to send the Nogri after them. Leia never would have found out about the Nogri, never would have turned the Nogri against the Empire. You know.
Yeah, that's true. That is very true. Well, Thrawn, you live and you learn, and
Mm.
sometimes you just
Now,
die.
an interesting thing too is because uh, Mount Tantus is actually is canon as a Bad Batch. We're probably going to see a bunch of this stuff. And as you said, Captain Pelion is in The Mandalorian and in Tales of the Empire. You know, Filoni is obviously bringing a lot of this stuff into canon for Heir to the Empire.
Yeah. And it will be very interesting to see how they go about doing that. Now, obviously, like you've said before, with talking about them doing their own version of this trilogy, and we do need to read, well, actually, no, they're the canon Thrawn trilogy. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's this. But, anyways, side from the point. Um, but with this, with where cloning is in Star Wars now, you've mentioned how more than likely the Night Sisters are probably going to play the role Sabaoth does in the new Heir to the Empire trilogy.
Hmm.
But I'm interested to see, like, okay, you bring in Mara Jade, right? How do you go about doing her? How do you go about doing a lot of this stuff? They have talked about a lot in like the Bad Batch and other stuff cloning force sensitive beings. It's been a thing that the Emperor has wanted to do for a while. Now, obviously, he's done it in some capacity by the time the Force Awakens, or sorry, Rise of Skywalker takes place. In some
Hmm.
capacity, he has made some kind of Force clone. So it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how they go about doing that with where cloning is at this point in time and how they explained it in this book.
Hmm.
The differences between the two.
Hmm. Now, you want to hear a wild kind of theory?
Sure. I'm always down
So
for wild theories.
here's what they should have done with Snoke in the sequels. Snoke, and you can even bring in you bring in all this cloning stuff, but Snoke was a deformed clone of Luke Skywalker from the Hand.
That would be pretty cool.
I mean, obviously, we're never gonna see this because they chose their own, somehow Palpatine returned, but whatever. Um,
We don't talk too much about those. Snoke was a really cool character in theory when we first saw him in The Force Awakens, and then we got nothing with him.
yeah.
I mean, the thing is, I'm not going to talk too much. Been talking for about 2 hours here, so I'm not going to talk too much on this. But I mean, as we've said plenty of times, I mean, they went into this new trilogy with no plan whatsoever. So
Mm,
obviously we're gonna get dog water.
yeah. Yes. Now, again, I said it when we read Heir to the Empire, and I'll say it again. This trilogy is a much better sequel trilogy to sequel to Star Wars than any sequels we have gotten in canon. I believe when I said this before, I believe you clipped it for a short, and I had said I would trade anything after the original trilogy if we just gotten this like movies of this trilogy. What I meant by that, because I know you'd clipped this and I'd gotten a comment basically, trying to defend the prequels, which I was not talking about the prequels. I was talking about canonically after, not
Yeah.
not
Honestly,
released after.
when I saw that comment, it clicked that that could be taken that way because when you
Mm,
said that, I took it the way that you meant it, which was anything that takes place canonically after Return,
yeah,
and that's how I took it. And then he said, "I would like to have the prequels too," and it's like, oh, yeah, I guess I can get how you would take it that way.
yeah.
That's not what we
I,
meant, but yeah,
because that was my original meaning behind that comment was, saying, anything canonically after Return that we've gotten, I would trade all
hmm
that, like all the Mandalorian stuff, all the um. I'm saying a lot of that is really good Star Wars, but I would trade that for the Thrawn Trilogy movies.
hmm done
Um,
verbatim.
yeah. Or well, you would have to if you already done the prequels or already planned on the prequels. You would have to change a few things, but you could still make it work with the same story.
You just have to cut around some things with the cloning, but nothing that they haven't already messed up currently with the the canon sequels.
Yeah.
So
I mean, okay. All you would have to change basically is on Mount Tantus they found Kaminoan cloning technology with samples of Jango Fett, and were able to
yeah,
restart cloning. To have that, you could even still keep the clone of um Luke Skywalker, and you could even explain Sabaoth as a clone, as just like a top secret, cloning thing from
yeah,
that where they were trying to clone Jedi, and like he was the only one that actually worked.
yeah, mostly. Yeah.
You could explain it and not have to go through all the mental gymnastics that they're going through now in Star Wars.
Speaking of Star Wars, since we're on Wikipedia, I've been seeing ads for it. We need to discuss if we're going to talk about Skeleton Crew, which comes out in about a week. Next next Tuesday is the first episode or premiere or whatever of it. And that is, I think, technically Star Wars. So
Hmm.
I'll say this for it right now. If anyone cares, not that we get comments on our videos anyways, but if anyone cares, comment down below and let us know if you want us to talk about it. And on the off chance that we don't get any comments, we'll discuss that later.
Yeah. Anyway, we've been recording for a while now, so why don't you go
Yes.
ahead and head us on onto an outro, unless you have anything else you would like to say.
Oh, all I have to say is this was a great trilogy to read through. I love these
Mm,
books. These are really good. The only reason I may or may not read through them again is mostly because of the fact that they just take a long time to get through. It's a trilogy.
mm,
It's like the same thing, same reason that you know, a lot of people might say that the first Pirates of the Caribbean is better than the second two because you have to watch both of them. But anyways, I really like these books. They're really good. David, I think you could probably agree that these were really good to read through. We got a bunch of other books and content to get through that we have never read before. So we are whittling down that stack. but these were really really good. Timothy Zahn did a great job of getting the characters right. So good job, good job all
Hmm.
around. All right. With that, thank you for sticking all the way down. It's all the way down. Thank you for sticking all the way to the end of this video. Please comment down below what you liked, what you didn't. Leave a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this content, and be sure to join us next week with on X-Wing Radio. I got out of there by the skin of my teeth.
You have skin on your teeth?
I don't understand that saying.